Welcome back, Honors. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom in our continuing discussion of the rise of imperialism during the 19th century, right? Yes, exactly. We left off in class talking about the rise of imperialism during the 19th century, right? We did a lot of moving, a lot of heavy lifting in class the other day where we actually started talking about the rise of imperialism, what it means, right? How that is going to be an intrinsically different thing from old imperialism when we were starting colonies like Jamestown and New Orleans and Plymouth and all that stuff, and how new imperialism is going to be characteristic of the 1800s because it is going to demonstrate that European powers are going to use their military and their technology to go off and take over underdeveloped areas in pursuit of economic gain and new resources, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is we left off in class talking about those resources specifically, and some of those resources that these Europeans are actually after, which they think are going to make them gobbles of money, but they actually end up costing them a lot of money because they actually, going to places that you have no business being in tends to be pretty expensive, right? Now, going into it, though, we left off in class talking about things like this, right? Things like palm oil, petroleum, rubber, cotton, iron, copper, gold, and diamonds being just a few of the examples of resources that imperialists wanted, right? And so you can look at two very particular ones on this list and kind of use it to just show you as well how the Industrial Revolution is beginning to play a major part in affecting European conquest and the access to resources, right? So palm oil, for example, was heavily wanted by Europeans because it was used to lubricate factory machines and keep them from breaking, right? Well, the thing about it, though, is that I don't know if y'all know this or not, but palm trees don't really grow in Europe very much, right? And if they do at all, they don't grow with enough volume to produce this much oil, right? So they're going to places where they can actually find them, right? And another big one that's a very, very great example to show us and demonstrate to us how imperialism works is the conquest, the attempted access to this all-important good right there. No, it's not maple syrup. It's rubber, right? So now rubber right there, of course, coming from rubber trees in Southeast Asia, and then also from rubber vines in Africa, is going to become a major, major important product in the processing of different other industrial goods, and especially the creation of automobile tires, right? Now, going into it, though, there are other smaller motives behind this as well. Imperialism is not going to be simply economic. It's also going to be seen through religion, because a lot of these early imperialists are going to bring with them missionaries, and they're going to be continuing to do the thing that they did all the way back into the exploration period, that God concept out of the God, gold, and glory, right? The thing about it, though, is that the motivations between God, gold, and glory haven't really changed that much from old imperialism to new imperialism, right? You can take those same exact three motivations and transpose them onto imperialism. The gold concept of the economic trying to get to these resources, right? Or the economic value of trying to get to these resources, right? Is the same exact thing as when the Spanish discovered gold in Mesoamerica, right? Or in North America and South America, right? Same thing too, God, right? When Columbus was trying to spread Catholicism, so are some of these imperialists going to be doing the exact same thing, right? And then the glory aspect is about to play a big part in this as well, but military outposts, foreign markets, and things like that are going to be huge. And then also, I skipped this one as well. This is another smaller motivation. This bad boy known as nationalism, right? So nationalism is going to be a major play in this entire imperialistic motivator because nationalistic fervor has begun to sweep throughout all of Europe, right? And what I mean by nationalistic fervor is pride in your people, group, country, place, location, etc., all that stuff, right? It's going to lead to countries being formed. When we looked at Germany and Italy, it's also going to lead to more imperialism because literally places like Great Britain are going to want to have more colonies than everybody else so they can brag and boast about it, right? And you could even see a very, very good primary source right here, right? It's a primary source, a book written by a woman named Ernest Ames, right? Mrs. Ernest Ames, that was written in 1899, is an ABC's book for baby patriots. This is a book to give to children to help teach them their alphabet, and it literally demonstrates how nationalistic intensity is tied to imperialism. Because look at what C stands for. Most kids get books that say A is for apple and B is for whatever other B word. It always goes like banana, bear, blah. Anyway, but according to Ernest Ames, C is for colonies. Rightly we boast that of all the great nations, Great Britain has the most. All right, so now that is ridiculous. ridiculous when you think about it that they're teaching children to be proud of how many imperial colonies they own, right? Now, the big thing about it, though, that we're now going to be getting into is the why now aspect, right? So we know that it is happening in the 1800s, but why now? Why specifically is it going to be taking off right around 1850, right? Now, notice when I say taking off right around 1850, the stuff that we're about to get into later in this flip is going to be taking place in the late 1700s going into the early 1800s, but it still applies, right? But imperialism exploded right around 1850 and leapt forward in a huge way, right? And a lot of it has to do with the fact that post-industrial technology is going to help Europeans spread way faster, right? For example, this bad boy, right? Anybody can fire a musket, right? And it takes like 2 minutes for the best in the, or excuse me, a minute to fire 2 shots for the best in the world, right? Well, this gun right here is going to make its debut during the 1800s and is going to dramatically shift the power dynamic of imperialized areas of imperialized areas and Europeans being able to take them over with ease, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is the thing that I'm talking about, or the gun that I'm talking about, is none other than the Maxim gun, right? And the Maxim gun is the very, very first fully automatic machine gun seen in Western civilization's history. Now, this bad boy, for those of you in the comments and the trolls that are out there right now being like, oh, the Gatling gun or the blah, blah, blah. Well, technically, those are not actually like gas-compressed, rapid-firing machine guns. They're actually a rotating barrel, so. Now, like, going into it, though, you have to understand that Maxim gun can actually fire upwards, like, the earliest models can fire about 200 rounds a minute. The later models can fire 600 rounds per minute, right? And so you're talking about 600 bullets coming out of that gun in a minute, right? Now imagine you're going to a place where they don't even have guns. And what is that thing going to do for you, right? And there was this really, really screwed up poem that people used to recite to kind of demonstrate how much power and superiority that one gun gave them. And it goes, whatever happens, we have got the Maxim gun and they have not. Which is one of the most screwed up things you could ever say, right? Like now, like going into it though, also, you're going to see steam-powered transportation be a massive advantage for the Europeans as well. Now they have things like steamboats, factories, machines. And now the kicker here, okay, like a steamboat, that's obvious of how it's going to be a big thing, of the why nows for the imperialist era, because literally now you have a steam-powered vessel that can easily sail you to where you need to go, right? But the one that's on this list that everyone needs to highlight, make it look like it's exploding, is this stuff right here, a type of modern medicine known as quinine, all right? Quinine is going to be a very, very important thing because it gives Europeans the ability to go and take over areas that they never could before because of a disease that was keeping them out, right? So this stuff right here is a plant from South America that actually makes quinine, right? And the thing about it is that the Inca had known how to use it for thousands of years, but had deliberately kept it a secret from European conquistadors, right? And so literally they were like, hey, don't tell those dudes about it, right? So, and they literally just didn't. They never actually let the word get out. But then slowly as the word began to eke out, and when the Dutch found out that you could actually grow that plant and make a solution of medicine to prevent the spread of malaria, it would be a really big deal, right? So that's the thing about it, y'all. Quinine actually solves and cures the symptoms of malaria, right? It doesn't cure the disease itself, but it gets rid of the symptoms that could actually kill you, right? So that being so that in the back of your mind, now you got to think about, oh wait, Mr. Terry, the Europeans want to go to places like Southeast Asia and Africa where mosquitoes were genuinely a problem, right? And so the thing about it is this stuff now gives them the ability to go off and do that and take over whatever they want, which is ridiculous, right? But now what we're going to be doing is moving into some of our specific examples of imperialism that actually happened throughout history. And the first one we're going to start off with is the British in China, right? So like now, the British in China, and then we're going to talk about the British in India, and then we could keep talking about the British in anywhere, because literally like a separation from Great Britain is like the biggest holiday ever celebrated. So we have to rewind all the way back to the 1790s, right? So in the 1790s, what you need to understand, Britain has no money. This is Great Britain in the 1790s. They are broke from wars, the American Revolution, and they have not financially or fiscally recovered yet, right? But on the flip side, China's the opposite of that. Like China actually was economically very prosperous, right? And they were practicing this thing called economic isolationism, right? Where literally the way that China saw itself and its market, next to economic isolationism, do me a favor and write a word that says closed, right? China was closed, not for business, but they were considered a closed market, right? And so economic isolationism, or being closed, means that literally China did not take its products to Europeans. They expected Europeans to come and get them, right? They were like, you can come all the way down here and you can get the porcelain we have, the tea we have, the silk we have, the stuff that you want oh so badly. You can come get it from us. We're not bringing it to you. That's not how this relationship works, right? And the thing about it, though, is if a European even wanted to arrive, they could only go to one city. And that one city was known as Canton, right? You could go to one city in China to pick up those goods, and it was called Canton, because the Chinese did not want Europeans milling around in their society and kind of dysfunctionally messing things up or like literally doing anything that would negatively impact them, right? China, because they practiced these things, was known quite often as the Celestial Kingdom in the late 1700s, being a place of economic prosperity, of limited poverty, and a place where things just generally were pretty efficient, right? And then Britain, of course, is going to show up and ruin that, right? And why is Britain going to ruin that? Because they're losing a lot of money, right? They're broke, China's not, and they're losing even more money every single year on their tea addiction, right? So Britain, okay, and Great Britain and the British, all right, so are heavily addicted to tea by this point, right? So what they're going to do is they're going to start trying to figure out a way to, well, first of all, better question, back it up. Why are they addicted to tea? Why would the British be addicted to tea? Well, the caffeine has a major like effect and a tie-in as well to the Industrial Revolution, right? You are now awake for more hours. You are now using things like caffeinated drinks to keep you awake for more hours. And then also, by this point, tea is becoming a British norm, right? Look at the Tea Act that happened on the colonies. Even like the colonists drank a lot of tea, right? So the thing about it, though, is with that cultural norm, you have to understand that tea was coming from China and it was extremely expensive. And upwards of 10% of the average household income of a Great British home could be spent on tea alone, right? Which is crazy. The British, though, need that tea, and they could still sell it for a lot big amount of money, but they can't figure out how to get it. So they want to figure out a way to find a product to try and trade the Chinese for straight up. So what they find, though, is a thing that the Chinese have made illegal a long time ago, and the British do one of the most screwed up things ever, and they decide to sell drugs to the Chinese. Like, I'm sorry. Yeah, like literally the plan was trade them opium for tea straight up. What the heck is the matter with you, right? The British literally plan to grow opium poppies, right, which are these plants right here that are used to make a drug known as opium, or if you're actually looking at the street drug version of it in the modern era, you're talking about heroin, right? And literally the British plan to grow these opium poppies in India, where they had large fields and enough agricultural setup to be able to get it done, right? And they were going to trade it to Chinese traders out in the water. Now, they weren't going to bring the drugs straight to, like, China and just drop them off, be like, hello, here, we have the drugs. So, yeah, because literally they can't do that. So what they did instead is they actually traded Chinese traders a case of opium for a case of tea in the water straight up. And then the Chinese would smuggle it back into their own countries, right? Now, the thing about it, though, is then they're going to take that tea and take it back to England and sell it for a massive profit. But the thing you need to understand, though, is that opium is stupid illegal in China, right? They had banned it for over 100 years before this because you don't really typically have a very productive society when you have a bunch of people on opium. Because opium is a depressant, right? It's a severe depressant. It actually makes you kind of like very, very slow and slow moving and stuff like that.
And now, my beauty, something with poison in it, I think. With poison in it, but attractive to the eye and soothing to the smell. Poppies. Poppies will put them to sleep. Sleep. Now they'll sleep.
Oh, what's happening? What is it? I can't run anymore. I'm so sleepy.
Here, give us your hands and we'll pull you along.
Oh, no, please. I have to rest for just a minute. Toto, where's Toto?
Oh, you can't rest now. We're nearly...
And so it's not going to be something that the Chinese want in their society. So it's been illegal for a really, really long time. Also, it can kill you. So, you know, that's a big deal, and it's highly addictive. And so literally the Brits are like, oh, you don't like it? It's illegal there? we're gonna do it anyway, and then they just like literally just did it anyway, right? And so what this is gonna end up leading though to is the outbreak of the Opium Wars, right? But what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm gonna stitch that like video in real quick, but I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. Talking about how this is going to lead to a series of wars, right? Well, the reason why it leads to a series of wars is due to the fact that the Chinese government under the Qing dynasty at the time, right? The Qing dynasty had been getting weaker over the decades and things like that, and had also been in power for over 100 years. The thing about it, though, is that the Qing dynasty tried to actually bring an end to this, right? They hired a very, very educated set of admirals and customs officers to try and figure out how they were going to stop the illegal importation of opium through their ports, right? And through their closed system. Well, the thing about it is that they do realize, and they figured out very early where the opium was coming from. They knew the British were bringing it in illegally, but the biggest thing that they wanted to do was try to avoid war, and they wanted to just try and seize any illegal opium that they could find on these boats, right? So if they found any illegal chests of opium or any illegal deposits of it, they would take it out primarily, and they would usually bring it onto the beaches and destroy it, burn it, or throw it into the water, right? They would actually throw it over the docks into the water. And in total, the Chinese government is going to seize and destroy about 21,000 chests of opium, which is worth millions of dollars in street value, right? Now, the thing about it, though, in the long run, is then on top of everything else is what the British response was. And it's the fact that they had the audacity to ask for compensation for the drugs that they were illegally importing and actually creating an illegal import-export business through a country that's not even their own, right? And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to clip in another flip. It's going to be nice and short, and we're going to actually wrap up everything talking about the Opium Wars, and then we're going to like kind of talk about the intro into British imperialism in India a little bit, right? But I'll see y'all soon. Y'all have a good one. Though is Britain, I don't think you really get to say you want money for illegal drugs that you had no right to be trading in this area in the first place, right? So when we look at this as well, this is a letter that the Qing emperor actually wrote to Queen Victoria, the monarch of England at the time, to try and get her to make the East India Company stop doing this. And apparently she never got it, right? So like now, which was absolutely ridiculous. Now the thing about it is when the Brits demanded compensation for their drugs, and then the Opium Wars break out because the Chinese government refuses to pay it, right? Now the very first Opium War ranged from about 1839 to about 1842, and the second one is going to range from about 1853 to 1860. Now the second one is going to be started because of like arsenic and bread and like a lot of other pointing fingers, and also the like couple of revolts that are going to pop up and stuff like that. But what's going to end up happening is the British are going to open a doorway, right? They're going to open a doorway using their advanced military because the Chinese just did not have the technology necessary to fight the British off. Let's use this picture really quick as a good example of that, right? So when you're looking at this, these were Chinese naval ships going into this war, right? As you can tell, they are still wind-powered with sails, right? But this one right here is being detonated and exploded because it's just been shot by this British warship known as the HMS Nemesis, right? The HMS Nemesis right here, look at that smokestack right there. That bad boy is powered by a steam engine, right? It does not need wind. It has long-range cannons on the front of it. It will literally destroy anything it comes in its path, and it's fighting against an army that is still going into this with some bows and arrows and also swords and very limited firearms, if many at all, right? So the thing about it, though, is both of these wars will happen, and the Chinese would lose, okay? Because they are technologically very far behind the Brits. Oh, and by the way, we were involved as well by the Second Opium War. The Americans get involved, the French, and the Russians, right? Now, they get involved because they see an opportunity, right? Because what began after the Opium Wars was a period of time known as the Century of Humiliation, right? So, whoop, messed up, go back. There we go. So the thing about it is known as the Century of Humiliation because literally technologically advanced Brits with their guns and their expeditionary forces were fighting against people carrying shields, swords, and using technology that wasn't quite up to par. And the Century of Humiliation actually begins, okay, after these wars because basically the Chinese historians characterized it as 100 years that would follow where the Europeans would show up and begin to impress upon the Chinese people unfair treaties, unequal treaties, and these things known as spheres of influence, right? So remember, China at the very beginning of this entire thing in the 1790s was economically very prosperous. They were also closed, is what it's called, okay? They were closed, all right? They had the Canton system, and if you wanted their goods, you had to go to them, right? Well, now what's going to happen is China will be opened to European influence, and spheres of influence would be established. What a sphere of influence is when Chinese ports, right, were going to be open to international trade merchants, okay? They weren't subject to Chinese laws. They were only subject to their own country's laws, and China had to pay them. So this is what a sphere of influence looks like, okay? So you see all this green right here? Those are British spheres of influence, right? The area the Brits got out of these opium wars where they could actually suppress the Chinese people who lived there and actually use all their ports to their advantage, okay? Japanese sphere right there. We'll talk about Japan a little bit later on, which is a very interesting little prospect. The French sphere down here in Indochina, which is now known as Vietnam. The German sphere right there, which is actually at the corner of the Yellow Sea. And the Russian sphere is right there. It's going to lead to a big war between them and Japan a little bit later on. Now, because of these spheres of influence, and because of this century of humiliation, of these unequal treaties that actually come down, where basically the Chinese are being forced to give up their land and their ports to other people, very large rebellions are going to break out, particularly one known as the Taiping Rebellion, which is going to claim the lives of over 20 million people when it was suppressed, and the Boxer Rebellion, which would be crushed by a coalition force of Americans, Russians, British, French, and German troops who would actually come in and destroy that rebellion as well. Rebellions are going to be a very, very big part of imperialism because the people that live there are going to actually try to rid their countries of foreign influence, right? So keep that in the back of your mind that is going to be a consistent theme going forward, okay? These uprisings were crushed at the loss of millions of Chinese lives. Over 20 million people died in the Taiping Rebellion alone. It is absolutely insane that a group of people, especially Europeans with technological advancements, showed up and just suppressed these people completely and utterly for economic gains and also for the extension of their own country. So that right there, that's imperialism. Do you see what I'm talking about? This is imperialism of the 1800s.